Hey friends. I'm back in my indoor Houston backdrop because it's cold outside. Who knew that Houston could go from 80 degrees and muggy to high 30s and frigid in the space of like 48 hours? Now I know. So I decided not to brave the elements today, but I just got back from another, pretty wonderful rehearsal. We're making great progress. So I'm trying to pinpoint when this thought hit me, but I was hit by a kind of flash or an impression in the middle of rehearsal, and it came out of something. I don't remember if it wasn't related to the show. It came out of a kind of a circumstance from life. But what showed up for me was this sense that, so hear me out. I need to sort of like give you the impression and then talk my way through it a little bit. But basically, I had the impression, or I got a picture of the fact that in life, good and evil, or good and bad, are kind of just roles that we're playing. And even so I think it came from reflecting on, maybe I'm just spending too much time in a theater where people play roles. But I don't think so. It was a realization that felt more, felt rooted in a kind of, felt like an impression from the universe, like a sense of a kind of truth that's not maybe obvious or always on the surface. And so it was like this sense that the way, I think also partly in the way we think of ourselves, like I noticed something about the way I view myself and what that constitutes, and how I then engage on the basis of that self-perception. And then I imagined people who, do things that we would call evil, or that we would say that's it's almost like any rational person would see that this is a bad way of conducting yourself, or that that you somehow are wronging other people by taking this action or whatever. Again, this impression came through very much in the abstract. It wasn't like it was tied to a specific circumstance or a specific thing I was thinking about. It just sort of like hit me like I actually scribbled it down on a note in the middle of rehearsal, because it was like all I could think to do to just capture that impression. And I think, what comes through for me is just a sense that, the way we judge ourselves and everything is so much the filter through which we see the world. And it's such a continuous process, not necessarily of dismantling our filters, but of becoming more conscious of them, becoming aware of the fact that we're filtering reality. So when I judge something or someone as good or bad or any other sort of like maybe less extreme sort of judgments somewhere along, I feel like there's kind of a spectrum, but in general, if you boil it down to the simplest terms, it's kind of the primal sensation that we get from something or from an impression. Good and bad kind of sums it up. Like we could add nuance to it or color but we often, that's how we feel things, is in this kind of binary way. We're attracted to it, we're repelled by it. We resonate with it, we don't resonate with it. We are interested, we're not interested. We're repelled. And so monitoring that and just sensing all of that, it was a really interesting thing to just kind of be hit with this and then think, well, what's that about? It's not. I think what was the way it was showing up was as a kind of request from the universe to hold my own self-perception gently, to not get too attached to how I see myself in those, in the world. Like not be too quick to decide this is who I am, or this is, there's a way in which it's almost like, I noticed this in spiritual practice and in all kinds of inner work, where we begin to do the work, and then we begin to learn sort of the principles of the work. We begin to learn how does the work work? How do we actually engage? How do we move forward in this arena? And it's often that we have to let go of some conditioning, right? We're constantly looking at some pattern or complex of patterns that we might have and that might be not serving us anymore, and that we might need to reevaluate. But the thing is, it only, like, we take one step in that direction, and very quickly we start to again crystallize a notion of good and bad. And I think what was coming through today was just another level of step back from all that. And because it's not so much that it frees us up to behave free of judgment. It's not so much that I want my behavior, that I want more freedom in my behavior, or that I'm looking for a way of having different judgments about what I believe is right and wrong, or good and bad. It's not so much that. It's more the nature of the judgment and the nature of how I hold that perception. Because the perception itself may remain, the judgment itself may remain, but if I'm not as attached to that, if I can on some level believe and see that these are roles being played in the world for a purpose, and that by holding them in that way, by understanding that, I gain a measure of freedom over how I respond. It's not that I want to change my perception. You can't tell, I'm unpacking what this means to me right now, but I think It's not so much that I want to change the judgment or not make the judgment or have a different judgment. It's more that I want to have some measure of freedom to not have that evaluation that I'm making dictate how I feel, how I think, what I do in response. Because if it does, then my response is compulsive on whatever level, however highly evolved, however generous and intelligent the response might seem, it's compulsive. And if it's compulsive, it's patterned, and it's not free. That's the definition of not free, is if cause just equals effect, well, where's there room for choice in that? And I think what I was feeling today was this sense of wanting to let go of my own judgments, wanting to hold my judgments a little more gently, and gain the freedom that comes with that, gain the measure of freedom that really lets me, because when I'm responding from a place of freedom, there's more energy, there's more ingenuity, there's more intelligence available, there's more connection available. I'm operating from a completely different position in the universe, and it's more empowered. I'm not the victim of my own judgments. I'm actually, I can choose to have the judgment or not. I can choose to. It also generally results in just a much more refined kind of critical gaze, because we're not letting the judgment mean anything right off the bat. It's like being perpetually curious, being forever curious what's there. And it gives us the tool to look at, well, what's my predisposition here? That's the thing that I'm always kind of looking at, is, well, what's my predisposition? If I have a predisposition to respond in a certain way, then again, I'm like a little less free. I'm just going to be tempted to respond in a certain way. Now, it might be that that's perfectly appropriate and exactly what I want to do. But even if that's the case, that measure of freedom and that measure of objectivity is how I evaluate and can, choose who I want to be. I think that's ultimately also a little bit of what's going on here. It's just a sense of greater choice over who I am, and greater permission for everyone else to be who they are, and greater permission to hold all that gently, to put just a little bit of a gap in there before my mind thinks it knows and grabs and kind of clamps down and says, okay, this is the truth now. Yeah, that's how I interpret this kind of flash that I had today, and it's certainly a way that I can see it. I can see it being relevant to me and where I am, and it's also that feels liberating. That feels like something that is useful to me in this place that I'm in right now. So that's what I got today, folks. Thank you for watching. I appreciate you. I love you. I love this conversation. Thank you so much for your attention and engagement. And have a wonderful day. I'll see you tomorrow.